Shortly before dawn on the morning of August 2nd, 1995, uniformed police officers kicked in the front doors of several duplexes in the sleepy, working-class Los Angeles suburb of El Monte. The houses, built all in a row on a single lot, were nearly identical to each other. In fact, with their nondescript features and beige motif, they were nearly indistinguishable from the typical homes found throughout the region's more prosperous suburban subdivisions, except for one unusual feature: a tall brick wall that surrounded the entire compound, with the rim covered entirely by barbed wire and metal spikes that faced inward. The only entrance or exit to the compound was a gated driveway with a guard station that seldom ever opened, except to let in or out commercial trucks laden with fabric or finished garments. On the day after the raid, the entire world woke up to screaming headlines from national and world media proclaiming the appalling and bewildering discovery of modern-day slavery in America. The compound was in fact a clandestine garment factory. 72 Thai nationals had been held for up to 7 years as indentured workers by a family-owned firm that required them to work over 18 hours per day, 7 days per week, sewing garments under threat of violence or retaliation to their families at home. The workers slept on the floor in crowded rooms upstairs and worked in a makeshift garment factory on the ground floor. They purchased their personal supplies from a company store in one of the units that charged exorbitant prices for basic household items such as soap and toothpaste. They were forbidden to leave the compound or use a telephone. Their correspondence home was monitored. The sole purpose of their existence was to produce garments and pay off their trip to the U.S. so they could send a few dollars home to their families. In the best of circumstances, their actual pay amounted to as little as $1.80 per hour. This exhibition tells the story of the El Monte Garment Factory, the workers who toiled there, and the campaign for justice that followed in the aftermath of the raid. More importantly, it aims to shed light on the social, political, and economic forces that created El Monte and continue to impact all of us today. Those who lived through the era of the early 90s remember that time for two things in particular: the advent of digital technology and the rise of a new globalized economy. In fact, the two went hand in hand. As computer chips became more and more powerful and computer networks became more sophisticated, captains of industry were no longer subject to the old limitations of time and distance. A decentralized business spread out over many different locations across the globe could be managed in real time from any one of its hubs. The future was here, and it was exciting. During that era, one wondered the new high-tech globalized future would look like and what new possibilities would be created by this novel configuration of global capitalism. The synergy of improved communication and efficiently facilitated by the lightning speed of digital technology would usher in an era unparalleled growth that would provide new opportunities for advancement and prosperity where none had ever existed before. It was during this time that El Monte case broke and provided the public with a rather anachronistic image of global capitalism. The Los Angeles garment industry that spread its wares across the world was connected to the impoverished Isan region of northern Thailand, not by fiber optic cables and software, but by high walls and barbed wire, by isolation and the constant threat of beatings and relentless 18-hour work shifts. Global capitalism in its most sophisticated and advanced form resembled more a cotton plantation of the Old South than a gleaming tower of crystal in a high financial capital of the world. The reality was even more discouraging, because the two were not direct opposites, but integral parts of a single whole. Why? Because the El Monte garment factory was not an aberration that produced itself in isolation. The El Monte factory was a direct result of a system of production devised by the very captains of industry who occupy the crystal towers. They knew what it cost to produce a garment within the constraints of wage and hour laws and simply chose to do otherwise. They knew they could wash their hands of the crime with the plausible deniability afforded by a decentralized manufacturing process, where the dirty business of exploiting workers was outsourced to enterprises like El Monte. If the labor force proved to be too politicized and defiant to be enslaved, a new one could be recruited from a land so distant that they would not have the minimal inkling that what they were experiencing was outside the norm. Ironically, as capital found the last barriers to investment on a global scale removed by digital technology, the workers who generated its wealth found themselves subjugated by the threat of deportation for having violated the very same confines of nationality that capital had simply learned to skip over. Capital had liberated itself of old constraints, but workers had not. Technology was not going to usher in any new opportunities beyond the scant ones that had been granted by the old industrialists of yore. Capitalist systems of production were indeed more advanced, complex, and far-reaching than ever before, but they were run as though the Rockefellers, Carnegies, and Vanderbilts of this world had never left the earth. Wealth was extracted by exploitation on a normal day, and by slavery whenever possible. The only thing new was the speed and efficiency which it could be done, and the convenience of anonymity afforded the slave masters by their increasing remoteness.